talking here with Lorna Crozier, who's one of Canada's best-known poets, I guess now. She's the author of 14 books of poetry and winner of the Governor-General's Award. She's edited anthologies, including Desire in Seven Voices and Breathing Fire, Canada's New Poets, and she's currently working as the chair of the Department of Writing and as a distinguished professor at the University of Victoria. Her latest book is The Blue Hour of the Day, Selected Poems. Welcome, Lorna.
Thanks, Ian.
Nice to meet you, too.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask was, way back whenever it was you started scrolling poems, how did that arrive, how did that come up in your life?
Oddly enough, I came from a house with no books. My mom and dad were farmers who'd lost the farm and moved into the little town of Swift Current, and they were by no means artistic at all, so they still wondered for many years where I came from. But I remember in grade 1, our teacher asked us to write a poem, I think, and we had a little toy Pomeranian dog at the time. And my parents would feed her chicken bones for dinner every Sunday night. Now we know we're not supposed to do that with small animals, right? Mm-hmm. They would fragment inside her, of course, and she would have trouble by Monday morning. And every time that happened, I thought my dog, whose name was Tiny, was going to die.
Ouch.
Yeah, and I would, pray that I would give up everything.
Plus you were right, too. She could have died.
She could have died. She actually lived to the ripe old age of 14. Okay. But I wrote a poem where I pretended she had died, and it had the refrain, and we shall meet in heaven by and by. And my teacher tacked that on the bulletin board and kind of patted me on the head. And that may have been the start of the poetry monster that I now am. I may have been created in grade 1. And of course everybody was full of sympathy for me because my dog had died. And I didn't want to admit that I lied, that she, was healthy and was continuing on her yappy little way.
Perils of writing fiction.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I learned then a couple of important things about poetry. One is that you write about what you care about, and 2 is that you invent and lie for the sake of the poem to get at whatever deeper truth is there. And maybe I haven't learned anything since. So then I didn't write for a long time, except unrequited love poems in high school. And when I was in my mid-20s, I started writing poetry again.
What was it that got you the second time, that got you interested?
Well, I went to university, first one in my family to do so. And what do you do at university? Because I love to read, I got a degree in English and ended up teaching high school. And I just read and read and read and read poetry, and finally just started to pen, a few of my own. And I think that's what really did it. It was just loving the words so much of other people that I tried to make up a few of my own.
Who were the writers then that were influencing you at that time?
There was this great little Canadian anthology edited by Eli Mandel, and Margaret Atwood was in there, and John Newlove. Those are the 2 I remember the best. I'm sure Souster was there, and Leighton. And Atwood blew me away when I was in my 20s. I not only thought, oh, you can write about this, you can write nasty love poems, tough, nasty love poems, but I learned a lot about how to end a line and that kind of craft stuff, which she has always been so good at. And John Newlove came from a very, very small town in Saskatchewan, Kamsack, Saskatchewan. So I think that gave me hope that you could actually be from nowhere, and someone might put you in a book one day.
You could tell us a bit about that, how you've managed to balance poetry with survival and...
Well, the first 15 years that Patrick Lane and I were together, and he's another Canadian poet, we just bummed around the country doing one writer in residency after another and hoping that one of us would get a Canada Council grant or whatever province we were living in, a provincial grant. And if one of us got it, we knew we had enough to scrape by, for a year, sometimes a year and a half. And, we were all over from Montreal to Edmonton. In Ottawa and Toronto and Regina and Saskatoon, and both of us at the U of T for a while. And then suddenly we both said, one of us better get a real job, because we've just about done every residency you can do.
It's a little tiring, too.
It gets tiring every year, packing up and moving, and it doesn't give you anything close to a pension or dental care, and your teeth start rotting as you get older. So we said, one of us better find a real job. And at that point, I was asked to apply for a position coming up at the University of Victoria, and applied for that in '91. And I've been there ever since, working full time.
What is it that starts you on a poem, and how do they grow in in your mind or on paper?
Well,
or
first of all,
however-
I need to get my head out of my jobs. You know, I have to leave the administration work behind and my students' work behind. What I find when I'm teaching is that what creative energy I have goes into helping, you know, someone else's poem, not my own. So I really need a quiet space, and it's like I have to shake all that stuff off like a dog shakes off water. And then usually reading someone else's work, like John Newlove's, you know, like Margaret Atwood, like P.K. Page, like Rilke, whatever. Reading a few lines of someone else's poem gets my own poetry wheels starting to spin, or oils them or something. And that often will lead me into writing my own piece. And then I write and write and write. I mean, the first draft you hope just comes, and you kind of hold your breath once the first line is there till you get to the end. And I don't know how it is for you, Ian, but if the ending isn't there near the beginning, it's a stillborn poem most of the time for me. I kind of have to have a whole concept there. And then I revise and read it out loud every time to make sure the sound is rich enough for it to be a poem.
Is it a concept or an image, or what is it that...
It can be either. It can be either. Probably more often than not, an image or a first line that might kind of be a concept.
So you want a first line and a last line, basically.
Yeah, and then you just fill in the middle. The peanut butter goes in really easily, but you need those slices of bread to make the sandwich work.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds very interesting, yeah. A lot of the people who be listening to you are younger poets. They're in their teens and they're looking at this as a kind of a career. Is there any advice you can give them about how to start in literature and keep going in it?
Well, first of all, I think you have to marry an orthodontist who loves the arts and is willing to support you for the rest of your life. So I'd highly recommend that. And of course, I fell in love.
So don't hang out with Patrick Lane.
Don't hang out with Patrick Lane. No.
Okay.
Read. I mean, I don't think anyone has to go to school to learn how to be a writer, and I'm saying that having taught in a writing department for many years, and I've met wonderful students, and I hope they've been helped by getting that undergrad degree in creative writing. But the good ones really don't need it. They maybe learn a little more quickly if they have a teacher, mentor working with them. But if you want to be a writer, you have to be an avid reader. And that's the kind of young poet I don't understand, who says, I want to be a poet, and I say, well, who have you been reading? And they don't have an answer. They can't be a writer then. I just guarantee they're not going to be a writer of any quality if they're not rolling around in poetry and covering themselves in sheets of poetry, partying with poetry. That's what they've got to do.
You mentioned that idea of a mentor too. Do you think it's good for young poets to try and find someone whose work they like and get in touch with them and ask them how they do it, or what should they do?
It would be great. Yeah. They might get a rude answer. They might have to prepare themselves for, I'm sorry, I don't have any time, or who the hell are you? But yeah, if there's a real writer living close by, I always try to at least answer my email when I hear from younger poets, and often they'll be presenting one of my poems to class in grade 11 or 12 or whatever, and they've got a few specific questions to ask, so I try to take the time.
Yeah. You were talking about Margaret Atwood and how it freed you up to the idea that poems could be tough things.
Yeah.
What about that kind of self-censorship? How do you get around that? How do you arrive at like core subjects in?
Sometimes I think I'm just stupid, you know, that I don't care. I have no moral code or something. But the advice I give to students who may not be as stupid as me is to not worry about the censor on your shoulder, to get rid of that, whatever it is, and write the poem, and then maybe put that censor back on when you think about, should I publish this or not? Many of the poems I published were hurtful to my mother, for instance, and I had to live with that decision. My partner, Patrick Lane, was a very serious drinker until 7 years ago, and that shows up sometimes in my work. But before I published those, I asked him what he thought, whether he would prefer I not send them out. I had to write them no matter what, but the question was, should I send them out and put them in a book? And he said, you know, they're good poems, go ahead. So everyone has to struggle with that, but I'd recommend getting the censor off your shoulder and writing what you have to write, even if it's mean, even if it's nasty, even if it tells a secret that hasn't been told before. You have to write it and then decide what to do with it.